Chapter 1. The Golden Apple of Discord. In the time before the war, long before the sound of war drums echoed across the plains of Troy, before ships blackened the seas and heroes fell like stars from the sky, there was peace, a golden age when gods feasted upon Olympus and mortals danced unaware of their fates. It began not with a sword, but with a wedding. The union of Peleus, a mortal hero, and Thetis, a sea nymph destined to bear a child greater than his father, was to be the most glorious wedding ever held between mortal and divine. The gods themselves descended from Olympus to bless the event. Zeus, Hera, Athena, Aphrodite, Apollo, Hermes, all were invited. All except one. Eris, the goddess of strife and discord, was left uninvited. Her presence, they feared, would bring turmoil to an otherwise joyous day. Offended and vengeful, Eris appeared anyway, unseen and silent until the moment was right. As gods and nymphs raised golden cups and sang praises, Eris stepped forward. She held in her hand a perfect apple, glowing with a divine sheen. On its side a single word was etched: "To the fairest." With a knowing smile, Eris tossed the apple into the crowd. It rolled across the marble floor, past Dionysus' spilled wine, and came to rest at the feet of Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. All three goddesses bent down. All three reached for it. Their eyes met, and lightning seemed to spark in the air. Even mighty Zeus grew silent as the tension mounted. Each claimed the apple was hers. Each believed herself the fairest of all. And thus began a quarrel that would shape the fate of mortals and immortals alike. The judgment no god would make. Seeking to end the dispute, Zeus refused to choose between his wife and two daughters. He instead sent the goddesses to Mount Ida, where a shepherd prince of Troy tended his flocks, ignorant of the world beyond. His name was Paris, son of King Priam and Hecuba, though he did not know it yet, for a prophecy had foretold he would one day bring ruin to Troy, and thus he had been cast away at birth, raised in secrecy among shepherds. Now the gods would summon him. Hermes appeared before Paris in a flash of light, with robes rippling like flame and winged sandals whispering through the grass. "O Paris," he said, "you have been chosen to judge a matter the gods cannot. 3 goddesses will appear before you. Choose the fairest among them." Paris, bewildered but bound by fate, agreed. 3 temptations. The goddesses arrived in a radiant blaze of light. First came Hera, queen of the gods, draped in imperial robes, her eyes full of power. "Choose me," she said, "and I shall grant you dominion over all kingdoms. You will be the mightiest king the world has ever known." Then came Athena, armored and wise, her spear shimmering in the sun. "Choose me," she said, "and I will give you unmatched wisdom and victory in every battle." Last came Aphrodite, goddess of love, clothed in beauty no mortal could resist. "Choose me," she whispered, "and I will give you the love of the most beautiful woman in the world." Paris looked upon them. Glory, wisdom, or love? He chose Aphrodite. He gave her the golden apple, and in doing so, doomed 1,000 ships to sail and countless souls to perish. Thus was the first stone cast. The goddesses vanished. Hera and Athena left seething, wrathful. Aphrodite smiled, already weaving the next thread of fate. Far away in Sparta, a queen named Helen, wife of King Menelaus, sat in her chamber, unaware of the storm gathering. But Eris, smiling in the shadows, knew. The war had begun, not with steel, but with beauty and pride. Chapter 2. The Judgment of Paris. A shepherd prince and the whisper of fate. Upon the slopes of Mount Ida, where the wild goats leapt and the olive trees whispered in the wind, a young man tended his flocks, unaware that his name would be carved into the bones of history. He was called Paris. Born of royal blood, but raised as a humble shepherd, he lived simply, playing his lyre beneath the trees, chasing lambs across the hills, and gazing at the stars with questions he could not name. His life was gentle, peaceful, ordinary. But the gods had not forgotten him. For on the day of his birth, the seers of Troy had foreseen a grim future. This child shall bring the ruin of the city. In fear, King Priam and Queen Hecuba had ordered the babe to be cast away. Yet fate, ever stubborn, had spared him. A herdsman raised him in secrecy, unaware he suckled the blood of kings. Now the wheel of destiny turned again. From the high heavens came Hermes, the messenger god, his sandals winged with speed, his eyes flashing like the morning star. The air shimmered as he descended, and the sheep fled bleating. Paris stood frozen as Hermes approached. "Paris of Troy," said the god, "you have been chosen by Zeus himself to render judgment in a dispute among goddesses. Be neither afraid nor proud, only just." And before the boy could speak, the wind shifted, the sky opened, light poured down like liquid gold, and through it stepped the three who would shape his doom. 3 divine visions. First came Hera, tall and stately, crowned in peacock feathers and robed in imperial silk. The ground itself seemed to bow before her. She looked upon Paris with the gaze of a queen addressing a servant. "She will be mine," she said, "and I shall make you king of all men. Asia, Greece, and the islands of the sea shall kneel before your throne. Wealth and glory beyond reckoning will be yours." Then came Athena, her armor gleaming like polished silver, a spear in her hand, and an owl perched upon her shoulder. She smiled, not kindly, but wisely. "She will be mine," she offered, "and I shall make you the wisest of kings. None shall defeat you in battle. Your name shall be spoken in awe, your enemies crushed, your cities eternal." Last came Aphrodite, barefoot and radiant, clothed in clouds and rose blush. Her hair shimmered like spun sunlight, and her smile made the air itself quiver. "She will be mine," she whispered, "and I shall give you a gift no king can buy, no warrior can win, the love of the most beautiful woman in the world." The choice of a mortal. Paris stood in silence. Power, wisdom, love. Each offer glittered like a crown of stars. Each promise was divine, yet his heart, like so many of mortal kind, was moved not by dominion or glory, but by longing. Aphrodite's words rang in his chest like music. He saw her, Helen, though he knew not yet her name, a vision of unmatched grace and beauty, a queen in a far-off land, chained to a king she did not love. He saw her smile, and in that moment, the seeds of desire were sown deep. Paris stepped forward. He placed the golden apple in Aphrodite's hand. "To the fairest," he said, his voice steady. The heavens seemed to sigh. The wrath of the rejected. Hera's eyes blazed like wildfire.
Athena's brow darkened like a storm cloud over the Aegean. Neither spoke, but their fury burned silently into the earth. They turned away, vanishing into the wind, their vengeance sealed. Aphrodite laughed softly, cradling the apple in her palm. "Well done, Paris," she said. "Now come, let me show you your prize." And the hills of Mount Ida trembled as fate was set in motion. A future cast in shadows. Far to the west, in the shining halls of Sparta, Helen, wife of King Menelaus, sat by her mirror. She did not know her name had been spoken by a god. She did not know her face had been promised like a trophy. But in her heart, she felt something stir, a wind rising, a shadow looming. The gods had made their wager. The mortal world would pay the price.
Chapter 3. The Abduction of Helen. In the halls of Sparta, polished marble gleamed beneath lion-headed pillars. Fragrant winds flowed from the Aegean, carrying the scent of salt and myrrh. Within the palace, veiled in silk and sunlight, dwelt the woman whose face would become a curse upon kingdoms. Her name was Helen. Daughter of Zeus and Leda, she was no ordinary queen. Born of a swan and a mortal, she was said to carry the beauty of the heavens in her eyes and the doom of empires in her breath. She was wife to Menelaus, king of Sparta, brave, honorable, and firm of rule. Yet even he, for all his valor, could not change her heart. Helen was admired by all, possessed by one, but owned by none. When she walked, the servants stilled. When she spoke, bards forgot their songs. Even the gods watched. And so did Paris. Aphrodite, true to her word, led Paris across the Aegean. With her blessing, he sailed upon smooth waters, carried by divine winds toward his fated prize. Sparta welcomed him in peace. He came as a guest, bearing gifts of gold and words of silk. Menelaus, bound by the laws of hospitality, received him as a friend and led him through the palace. They dined beneath torchlight. They drank from silver goblets. Yet all the while, Paris watched Helen, and Helen, drawn as if by moontide, watched back. She did not know why her heart stirred. She did not know that Aphrodite's hand was upon her. She only knew that when Paris spoke, the world seemed to lean closer. And so, when Menelaus was called away, summoned to Crete for a funeral rite, he left Paris within his halls, trusting the customs of Xenia, the sacred Greek bond between host and guest. But the gods had no use for mortal law. Under a moon carved sharp like a blade, Helen stood upon the balcony of her chamber, her fingers trembling on the stone. Below her, Paris waited, his ship hidden in the cove, its sails furled like wings. "Leave all behind," he said. "Come with me to Troy, where the songs will be of you, where you shall be a queen in truth." Helen looked once at the palace where she had lived, at the bed where her daughter slept, at the crown she wore with golden thorns. Then she stepped into the night. With Paris, she fled. Some say Aphrodite enchanted her heart, made her forget her vows. Others say the longing was her own, that love, true or false, is a form of madness. Whatever the truth, when the dawn rose over Sparta, Helen was gone, and with her, peace fled the earth. When Menelaus returned and found the palace cold, the bed empty, and the Trojan ship vanished beyond the horizon, his cry shook the walls. The betrayal seared through his honor like a brand. This was no mere theft.
This was an insult to every law of guest and god. Helen, his wife, Paris, his best. The shame could only be washed away in blood. He summoned his brother Agamemnon, High King of Mycenae. He called upon all those who had once sought Helen's hand, for they had sworn an oath years before to defend her marriage, to prevent war through unity. Now that oath would become a chain. The kings of Greece began to gather. Ships were built, spears sharpened, prophets consulted. And across the sea, in the proud towers of Troy, King Priam welcomed Helen with honor, never knowing that by opening his gates, he had opened the door to fire. On Mount Olympus, the gods watched, divided. Hera and Athena, scorned and vengeful, whispered to the Greeks. Aphrodite, smug in her triumph, wrapped Helen and Paris in illusions. Zeus, ever wary of prophecy, let the mortal threads weave themselves. The stage was set. The war to end all songs was coming.
Chapter 4. The Oath of the Greeks. The Broken Peace. Across the lands of Achaea, the fires of war were lit. From the stony halls of Mycenae, the High King Agamemnon summoned his vassals. His voice was law, and his rage mirrored that of his brother Menelaus, who stood beside him with a heart like iron. "She was stolen," Menelaus swore. "Our honor has been spat upon. The gods themselves call for justice." And they did not stand alone. For once, long ago, when Helen was of marriageable age, kings and princes from every corner of Greece had gathered to win her hand. Fearful that her beauty would lead to bloodshed, her guardian, Tyndareus, the old king of Sparta, had extracted from each suitor a solemn vow to defend the chosen husband, whomever he may be, to honor the decision, to unite against any man who would try to steal her. It was the oath of Helen, and now it was being called upon. One by one, the messengers rode. The summoning of kings. From Pylos came wise Nestor, old as the mountains, with a voice like flowing rivers and memory of 3 generations of men. He answered the call with counsel and chariots. From the island of Salamis came Ajax the Greater, towering like a mountain, his shield broad as a city gate, his courage unquestioned. From Crete came King Idomeneus, swift of sword and faithful to his oath. From Thessaly, a voice hesitant rose. The call went to Achilles, son of Peleus and Thetis, the sea nymph. Still a youth, yet already a name feared. It was foretold, without Achilles, Troy could not fall. But Thetis, loving her son, feared the prophecy. She hid Achilles away, disguised him as a girl among the daughters of King Lycomedes on the distant island of Scyros. Yet fate, as ever, would not be denied. The cunning of men. Among the shooters once bound by oath was Odysseus, king of Ithaca, crafty, cautious, lover of home and hearth. He had no love for war, and even less for the vanity of Helen. When the call reached his shores, he feigned madness. He yoked an ox and an ass to his plow, sowed salt into his fields, and muttered nonsense. But Agamemnon's envoy, Palamedes, was no fool. He placed Odysseus's infant son, Telemachus, before the blade of the plow. Without pause, Odysseus veered aside. The plow missed the child. The lie was exposed. Odysseus sighed. Very well, if war is our fate, let it be the clever that survive it. And so the cleverest of men joined the cause, though in his heart he cursed the gods and dreamed of whom. The finding of Achilles. Disguised though he was, Achilles could not hide from destiny. Odysseus, now tasked with finding him, arrived at Scyros in disguise. Among the maidens he placed gifts, jewels, silks, perfumes,
and a gleaming sword. Then, sounding the horn of war, he watched. While the girl shrieked, one figure seized the blade. Achilles stood revealed. "You knew," he said, eyes bright. "I knew," he replied. "The world cannot fight without its fire." Achilles joined the host, not for glory, but for the promise of a name remembered. Even then, he knew the cost. 1,000 ships. Across the Bay of Aulis, the tide of warriors gathered. Black ships lined the shores like teeth. Sails flapped, spears clattered, war cries echoed. The kings of Greece had become one host, fierce, proud, and terrible. They came from every isle and kingdom: Argos, Thebes, Rhodes, Corinth, Athens. They came not only for Helen, but for vengeance, glory, and prophecy. At their head stood Agamemnon, lord of men, and beside him, in armor kissed by gods, stood Achilles, his mother's blessings still wet upon his brow. But the winds would not blow. The fleet remained still upon the waters, trapped by calm seas and unmoving skies. And so they turned to the prophet Calchas, interpreter of omens and voices divine. His eyes turned pale. "The Artemis goddess is angered. Agamemnon has offended her. To move the winds, a sacrifice must be made." "What sacrifice?" "Your daughter, Iphigenia." The gods would have blood before they gave wind. And so the tide of war stalled on the edge of silence. Chapter 5. The Prophecy and the Sacrifice. The windless Bay of Aulis. The fleet lay stranded. At Aulis, where 1,000 black ships lined the shore like a forest of masts, there was no breeze. Day after day, the sails hung limp. The sea slept. The oarsmen waited. The warriors grew restless, sharpening spears that would not be thrown. And in the silence, dread grew. "The gods deny us passage," the men whispered. "We are cursed. Troy will never fall." But Calchas, the high seer, had spoken. "The goddess Artemis is angered. King Agamemnon, you have slighted her, boasted your skill as greater than hers. The huntress does not forget. To soothe her wrath, you must offer a sacrifice, a noble blood, your daughter, Iphigenia." A king's dilemma. Agamemnon reeled. Iphigenia, his daughter, his joy, his child with Clytemnestra, queen of Mycenae. She knew nothing of war. She danced in the gardens and braided her mother's hair. He raged. "No, I am father before king." But the tide of war would not wait for grief. Menelaus, his brother, burned with fury. "Would you let one life damn 1,000? Helen is gone. Troy mocks us. Will you now shame Greece by turning back?" The generals murmured. The kings tightened their grips on their swords. Odysseus, cold-eyed, said nothing, but he knew the weight of decisions. Agamemnon turned to Calchas one last time. "Is there no other way?" The prophet was silent. And so the king chose duty over love. A message was sent to Clytemnestra in Mycenae. It spoke of joy, not sorrow. "Come to Aulis with Iphigenia. Achilles has agreed to marry her. The fleet awaits a royal wedding." Hope filled the queen's heart. The girl was delighted. When they arrived, the truth remained hidden until the very moment of offering, when the altar was raised and the priest stepped forward. Clytemnestra screamed. Iphigenia trembled. Achilles, who had known nothing of this, stepped between the king and the blade. "I was never promised a bride," he said, fury in his voice. "If you spill her blood, it will not be without mine." But Calchas raised his hands. "Peace, Prince, the gods have spoken." And Iphigenia, pure of heart, stepped forward. "If my death will calm the seas, then let me fall for Greece. May my name be remembered not in tears, but in honor." A silence fell upon the camp. Then the knife descended. Divine mercy or deception? But in the final moment, as the blade flashed, a strange thing happened. Some say Artemis, moved by the girl's courage, intervened. A white mist enveloped the altar, and when it cleared, Iphigenia was gone, spirited away to Taurus, where she would serve the goddess as priestess. Others say she died, and her cries echoed over the waves like gulls in mourning. Only the gods know the truth. But when the sun rose again, the wind had returned. The ships departed. The sails billowed, the ships groaned as they leapt forward into the deep. Men cheered, but the king stood still. Agamemnon's eyes were dark. He had won the war's beginning, but he had lost something far greater. And so the fleet moved east, toward Troy, toward glory, toward doom, leaving behind a silent altar and a mother's scream that would one day echo back with fire and vengeance.
Chapter 6. The Shores of Troy. The sun rose bronze over the Aegean, its light burning through mist and salt as the vast armada of Achaea came into view. More than 1,000 ships, hulls blackened by tar and time, advanced in dark ranks. Wooden beasts riding the waves, their sails taut with wind blessed by blood. Shields lined their rails, spears bristled like forest thorns. On every deck, men stood armed and silent, faces grim with fate. And at their head, Agamemnon stood tall on the prow of his flagship, clad in bronze, helm gleaming like a sun. Beside him stood Odysseus, calculating and calm. Ajax, mighty as a mountain, adjusted his colossal shield. And above them all, the voice of Achilles rang clear. "There lies Troy," he said, pointing to the distant rise. "Let the world remember this dawn." On the shore beyond, Troy stood proud, its walls high as hills, forged by the gods themselves, said to be built by Apollo and Poseidon. They had not seen war in generations. Now they would see fire. The first to fall. As the ships neared land, a dark prophecy whispered through the ranks. "The first Greek to set foot on Trojan soil shall be the first to die." No man moved. The hull scraped against sand. Silence. Then, from the ship of Odysseus, a warrior leapt forward. Protoclus, a prince of Phylas, eager for glory. His boots struck sand. He drew his sword. The wind cried out. A single arrow flew from the walls of Troy and struck his chest. He fell without a word. The prophecy was fulfilled, but the line had been crossed. The clash begins. The Greeks surged ashore in thunderous waves, bronze greaves flashing, swords drawn, trumpets screamed, sand churned beneath running feet. Trojans, taken off guard, rushed to arms. Prince Hector, son of Priam, rallied their forces. The prince was no mere noble, he was the soul of Troy. His armor bore the scars of 100 hunts, and his eyes saw clearly through fate's veil. "Drive them back to the sea," he roared. But the tide was unrelenting. The beach became chaos. Spears clashed, chariots raced, arrows darkened the sky. Achilles struck like lightning. None could match his speed, his fury. Men fell before him like wheat before a blade.
Blood steamed on the sand. The gods watched. The gates hold fast. Though the Greeks raged at the gates, Troy held fast. Its walls rose too high, its towers bristled with archers. The city would not fall in a single day. The Greeks withdrew, choosing instead to build their camp on the plain between city and sea. They dug ditches, raised palisades, and began a siege. It would not be days or weeks, it would be years. A war without end. As night fell, the fires of the Greek camp lit the shore like fallen stars. Songs of war echoed, laughter, grief, prayers. In the heart of the camp, Achilles cleaned his blade in silence. The gods favor none, but the dead they remember. Far above, on Mount Olympus, the gods themselves were beginning to choose sides. Hera and Athena, still burning with insult, whispered vengeance into the hearts of the Greeks. Aphrodite, watching over Paris and Helen, cloaked Troy in her charm. Apollo, bright and terrible, looked upon Hector and smiled. The board was set. The war had begun in earnest.
Chapter 7. Achilles and Agamemnon clash. A war within a war. The siege dragged on. From the high walls of Troy, its defenders rained arrows and taunts. The Greeks, though fierce, could not breach the gates. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Raids and ambushes became the rhythm of the battlefield. But the greatest blow would not come from Troy. It would come from within. A spoil of war. One evening, as the sun sank red behind the hills, a skirmish ended in Greek victory. A Trojan priest of Apollo, Chrysis, was taken captive with his daughter, Chryses, a woman of great beauty. She was gifted to Agamemnon as a prize of honor. But Chrysis pleaded for her return, offering gold and prayers. Agamemnon refused, scorning the priest. "No man tells me what I may keep. She is mine, and I shall take her to my bed." But Apollo heard his servant's cries. That very night, a plague descended upon the Greek camp. Fever, death. The cries of the sick echoed louder than the clash of arms. Achilles speaks. In the tent of Achilles, anger brewed. He called a council. Kings and warriors gathered. The air was thick with heat and sickness. The seer Calchas revealed the truth. The plague was the work of Apollo, and only the return of Chryses would end it. The warriors murmured. All eyes turned to Agamemnon. His pride flared. "Fine, take the girl, but I will not be dishonored. If I must give up my prize, I will take another. I will take Briseis, Achilles' own." The words struck like lightning. Achilles stood, tall, terrible, golden-haired and burning with rage. His hand fell to his sword. The camp tensed, but Athena herself descended, unseen to all but him. She seized his wrist. "Do not strike, son of Thetis. Your time will come." So he did not kill Agamemnon. Instead, he withdrew. "I shall not lift my spear, not until the Greeks beg for my return." And with that, the greatest warrior of Greece turned his back on the war. A camp divided. Briseis, weeping, was torn from Achilles' tent. Patroclus, his dearest companion, tried to reason with him, but Achilles sat beside the sea, unmoving, staring into the waves. "I shall not lift my spear, not until the Greeks beg for my return." And from afar, his mother, the sea nymph, Thetis, heard his cry. She rose from the deep and came to him, her face silver with sorrow. "What would you have, my son?" Achilles replied,
justice. Let the Greeks suffer. Let Zeus tilt the balance until they beg me on their knees." And Thetis, though her heart broke, ascended to Olympus to whisper in Zeus's ear. Zeus heard her. He nodded, though Hera burned with jealousy. "So it be," he said. "Let Troy rise and the Greeks fall. Let them learn what they have lost." The sky darkened. The game had changed. For without Achilles, the heart of Greece no longer beat in battle, and the war was about to turn.
Chapter 8. The Rise of Hector. Troy awakens. From the high towers of Ilion, Prince Hector, eldest son of Priam, gazed across the plain. Smoke curled from the Greek camp. The sound of coughing, of groaning soldiers and weakened cheers drifted to the walls. He turned to his brother Paris, whose vanity was cloaked in perfume and polished bronze. "Their champion sulks in his tent," Hector said. "Achilles fights no more." "Then now is the time to strike?" Paris asked. "Not yet," Hector replied. "Not until the gods will it." But his heart knew the gods had already chosen. Troy strikes back. When dawn broke, the Trojans poured forth from the gates like a flood long held at bay. Hector led the charge, his chariot thundering, his lance a silver fang. His voice rallied men and gods alike. The Greeks reeled. Without Achilles, their line faltered. Even Ajax the Great struggled to hold position, his shield drenched in blood and sweat. Men fell like wheat before a scythe. Agamemnon wounded, Diomedes outmatched. Odysseus, brilliant though he was, could not turn the tide alone. And above them, Apollo, god of light and plague, flew unseen, guiding Hector's spear. The duel. At the heart of battle, Hector faced Ajax. Two towers of war, two titans. Their clash shook the field, spears shattered, shields buckled, neither yielded. As dusk fell, the heralds called a truce. Both armies stood in awe, knowing they had witnessed gods in mortal form. The duel ended in a draw, but Hector had done what no Trojan had done in 9 years. He held the field. Chapter 9. Embassies to Achilles. Desperation in the camp. The air in the Greek camp was thick with despair. Their bravest bled, their leaders limped. The Trojans, once thought to cower behind walls, now surged across the plain like lions set loose. And Achilles, the mightiest of all, still sat in silence, far from the cries of the dying. In Agamemnon's tent the lords gathered. Odysseus, Ajax, Phoenix, and Nestor, gray and wise, debated into the night. "We must humble ourselves," said Nestor. "Even kings must kneel when ruin is at hand." Agamemnon bowed his head. He would send an embassy. He would offer riches, lands, even the return of Briseis. He would beg if that was the cost of victory. Tent of Achilles. By firelight, Achilles played his lyre. The melody was strange, half mourning, half fury. Beside him sat Patroclus, ever faithful, his face shadowed by worry. When Odysseus and the envoys arrived, Achilles welcomed them with meat, wine, and courtesy, but his eyes stayed cold. Odysseus spoke first. "Achilles, son of Peleus, we come not with commands, but with the needs of all Greece. Without you, we fall. Come back, let your wrath end." He laid out the offers: gold, bronze, women, and honor, even Briseis herself. Ajax rose next,
a man of few words, but his voice rumbled like a mountain. "You are our strongest. We do not ask as kings, we ask as brothers." And finally Phoenix, Achilles' old tutor, wept as he spoke. "I held you as a babe. I watched you learn the spear. Do not let pride ruin all." Silence fell. Achilles looked into the fire. "I have fought for 9 years. I sacked their cities. I bled for Agamemnon's pride. And when I was wronged, what justice did I see?" He turned to Odysseus. "You offer me gold? I have more than I need. You offer me honor. It is dust in a man's mouth when his name is spat upon." And then he said the words that shook them all. "I will not return, not for gold, not for glory, not for Greece. My heart is broken. I shall sail home. Let the Greeks burn. Let Agamemnon fight his own war." They pleaded. He remained unmoved. The embassy returned to camp, empty-handed, defeated. But Patroclus watched him closely. "Will you truly abandon them?" Achilles said nothing. He looked to the sea. He dreamed again of Thetis, his mother, and of the fate foretold. "If you fight, your name shall never die, but you will. If you return home, you will live, but your name will fade like smoke." And the storm inside him raged, for even the strongest man cannot run forever from destiny.
Chapter 10. The Fire at the Ships. Troy ascends. Dawn broke with no Greek trumpet sounding. Instead, the Trojans surged forth like a tidal wave. Their spears shone in the morning sun, their war cries shaking the clouds. At the head rode Hector, chariot wheels grinding the earth, his eyes ablaze. "Drive them to the sea," he cried. "Let them beg their gods from their knees." The Greeks, disheartened and disorganized, fell back toward their ships. Even mighty Ajax, who had once fought Hector to a standstill, found himself guarding the rear alone as comrades fled. Poseidon, god of the sea, looked down in rage, his temples burned by Trojans, and sent waves crashing against the shores. But it was not enough. The Trojans would not be stopped. The ships aflame. The heart of the Greek fleet were the black-hulled ships beached on the shore. If they fell, the war was lost. Hector, sword in hand, led a direct charge to the ramparts protecting the ships. He leapt over the wall like an eagle and smashed through the gates. With one great throw, his spear struck the hull of the ship of Patroclus, the first Greek to die when they landed. Fire caught. Flames leapt from sail to sail, mast to mast. The Greek warriors screamed. Smoke choked the air. Armor clanged in chaos. The fleet, their only way home, was burning. And still, Achilles sat in silence. The breaking point. In Achilles' tent, Patroclus watched the fire rise. The smell of smoke reached even here. His fists clenched. "They are dying, Achilles. Ajax cannot hold. Nestor is wounded. Diomedes has fallen. Hector is burning the ships." Achilles stared ahead, unmoved. "Let Agamemnon taste the bitterness of war. Let him learn what I am worth." Patroclus dropped to one knee. "Then let me go in your place. Let me wear your armor. The sight of you alone will turn the tide. Let me save them." Achilles' eyes met his. "You are my heart, Patroclus. If you die, I will have nothing left. And if I do nothing, we all die." Silence. Then, "Go," Achilles said, placing the armor on him. "But do not chase Hector.
drive them back, then return. The armor gleamed in the sunlight. Even the gods mistook him for Achilles. Hope rekindled. As Patroclus emerged in the bronze armor of Achilles, the Greeks roared. Even Hector faltered. The invincible warrior had returned. Like a storm, Patroclus drove the Trojans back. He slew dozens, common soldiers, captains, and sons of kings. He reached the ship's ramparts and extinguished the fires. The Greek line rallied. But Patroclus, in the rush of triumph, forgot the warning.
Chapter 11. The Death of Patroclus. Clad in Achilles' bronze armor, Patroclus charged like a storm across the battlefield. To the Greeks, hope was reborn. To the Trojans, terror had returned. "Achilles has returned!" they cried. "He cannot be killed!" But the truth rode beneath that gleaming helm. A brave heart, but not invincible. Apollo, watching from above, knew the truth. And so too did Hector. The push beyond the line. Patroclus was meant to push the Trojans from the ships, nothing more. But battle intoxicates. With each kill, he pressed further, beyond the safety of the Greek line, beyond the warning of Achilles. He stormed the gates of Troy itself, driving the Trojans back to their walls. There, atop the walls, Apollo watched with disdain. "You go too far, mortal." He descended unseen and struck Patroclus from behind, dazing him. His shield fell, his spear dropped. Then came Euphorbus, a young Trojan, swift and proud, who drove a spear into his side. Patroclus stumbled, and then came Hector. The duel that should never be. Bloodied and weary, Patroclus faced Hector. "You are not Achilles," Hector said, lowering his blade. "No," Patroclus whispered, "but I fight for him, and he will come for you." Hector, proud but not cruel, hesitated. But the war demanded blood. His spear found Patroclus's heart. The warrior fell. The last words. As he lay dying, Patroclus looked to the sky. "You were right, Achilles, but I could not watch them die." To Hector, he whispered, "You have slain me, but it will not save you. Achilles will come." His breath left him. The armor of Achilles clattered from his body, soaked in blood. The roar of the sea. Far away, Achilles heard the news. A messenger came, trembling. "Patroclus is dead, slain by Hector, his body taken." The sea answered with silence. Then came the scream, not of grief, but of wrath. "Hector, you have sealed your fate!" His mother Thetis rose again from the sea. "You will die if you return to battle." "Then let me die, but I will not rest until Hector lies broken beneath my spear." The lion had awakened, and the world would burn. Chapter 12. The Rage of Achilles. The wind howled over the dark sea. Achilles stood on the shore, staring into the waves as if they could return his dearest friend. His fists clenched, his jaw trembled. And then a scream tore from his throat, shaking heaven and earth. "Patroclus!" The myrmidons fell silent. Even the waves held their breath. Far on Olympus, Thetis, mother of Achilles, rose from the sea. She climbed the shining heights to the forge of Hephaestus, god of fire. She begged, "Make him armor. He goes to die, and he must go as a god." Hephaestus labored. He forged a shield like the world itself, sun and stars, war and peace, cities and sea. A breastplate of divine bronze, burning with celestial fire. A helmet crowned with horsehair that glowed like the sun. He said,
No man shall stand against him. But know this, when he wears this armor, he walks to his doom. When Achilles stepped onto the field, silence fell. His armor sang in the sunlight. Even the Trojans stopped to watch. Even Hector grew pale. "Bring me the body of Patroclus," Achilles commanded. He fell to his knees, touched the cold face of his friend. "Forgive me, I should have been there, but I swear by the Styx, I will not eat nor rest until Hector lies dead beneath my spear." And the earth shook with his fury. What followed was no longer war, it was retribution. Achilles moved like wildfire. He slashed through legions, his spear drinking blood. No armor could stop him, no prayer could save them. 12 Trojan princes fell beneath his wrath that day, and still he screamed for Hector. So many died that the river Scamander choked on the dead. The god of the river rose in fury. "You defile my waters, son of Thetis. Enough blood!" He surged to drown Achilles, but he would not yield. He fought the river itself. He burned the trees to embers. He called upon Zeus, and the gods watching from Olympus knew that no mortal had ever burned brighter than Achilles did that day. Athena stood by Achilles, whispering war into his ear. Apollo shadowed Hector, trying to delay the inevitable. Hera, Poseidon, and Hermes held back, unsure which thread fate would sever next. And in the sky above Troy, Zeus wept. "His time comes soon," he said, "but let him blaze. Let the world remember him."
Chapter 13. The Death of Hector. The walls of Troy trembled. The sun was setting behind Troy, painting the sky in blood and gold. Hector stood alone outside the Scaean gates, armor polished, sword steady, but hands trembling. From the walls above, King Priam and Queen Hecuba cried out, "Return inside, my son! Let the walls protect you!" But Hector did not move. "I will not cower. If I must die, I will die on my feet." Behind him, Troy held its breath. Before him, Achilles approached, a storm wrapped in bronze and wrath. The chase around the city. Hector saw Achilles, and terror pierced his heart. He ran, once around the city, twice, 3 times, and Achilles chased him, relentless as death. Even the gods were moved. "Shall we save him?" asked Zeus. But Athena said no. "This is fate. Let it be fulfilled." She descended to Hector in the form of his brother Deiphobus. "Stop running, brother. Let us face him together." Hector turned and stood his ground. But when he looked to his side, Deiphobus was gone. He understood then he had been deceived, but he did not run. The duel of destiny. Achilles stood across from him, breath steady, spear in hand. "You stole Patroclus from me, you wore my armor, butchered my soul. He did what I must for Troy, then die for her." They circled. Hector threw first, Achilles dodged. Achilles cast his spear, it missed, but Athena returned it to his hand, unseen. Hector charged, and in a flash, Achilles drove his spear through Hector's neck, avoiding the windpipe. "You'll not speak to me in death. Die silently." Hector fell. "I beg you, return my body to my father," he gasped. Achilles stood over him. No bargains, no mercy. Then he tied Hector's body behind his chariot, and as Troy wailed from the walls,
Achilles dragged Hector's corpse across the dust. Grief and dishonor. The Trojans screamed, Priam collapsed, Andromache, Hector's wife, heard the cry and ran, only to see her husband's body in the dirt far from the gates. Inside his tent, Achilles refused food, refused sleep, staring at the corpse of Patroclus. "Even this will not be enough," he whispered. Each day, he dragged Hector's body around Patroclus's grave, defying gods and men. The gods intervened. The gods watched in silence. Apollo wept for Hector. Zeus grew angry. Even the mighty must know restraint. He summoned Thetis. "Go to your son. Tell him to give up the body." And in the dark of night, a king, Priam of Troy, would soon walk alone into the tent of his enemy.
Chapter 14. Priam's Night Visit, a Father's Plea. The lonely road. Night cloaked the plains of Troy. All slept, soldiers, kings, even the gods for a moment. All except one man. Priam, king of Troy, now old and broken, knelt in his palace. He had lost 50 sons in this war, but none like Hector. "I must go," he said, arising. "I must beg the man who killed him." His advisors screamed. Hecuba tore her hair, but Priam was unmoved. He filled a wagon with gold, silver, and precious robes, ransom for his son's corpse. And then, guided by Hermes in disguise, he passed through the enemy lines unseen, unheard. Inside the tent of Achilles, Achilles sat beside Patroclus's body, still not buried. He wept, touched the face of his fallen friend, and whispered memories into the dark. Then the flap of the tent rustled. A man entered. Old, bent, cloaked in grief. Priam knelt. "I kiss the hand that killed my son, because he was my son, and I am his father. But you too had a father, Achilles. Think of him. Would he not weep if you were slain?" Achilles stared in shock. Then something cracked in him. The wrath broke, the grief roared, and he wept with Priam. Two enemies, side by side, in mourning. Achilles stood and gently placed Hector's body in a linen shroud. He called his servants. They washed the corpse, perfumed it, wrapped it with care. "You shall have him," Achilles said. "Take him home. And I grant you 12 days to mourn, to bury him as a prince." Priam bowed, tears streaming down his face. "May the gods bless you, son of Thetis. Though you took my son, you've given me peace." That night Achilles and Priam shared a meal. The boy who had burned with fury now sat beside the father of his foe. The return to Troy. At dawn, Hermes guided Priam back to the city, bearing the body of Hector. The gates opened slowly, and from the walls a cry rose that shook the heavens. Andromache collapsed, Hecuba wailed, and Helen, the cause of the war, mourned the man who never blamed her. "You were the kindest to me, you alone." For 9 days they wept. On the 10th they built a pyre, and Hector, breaker of horses, was buried with honor. Chapter 15. The Funeral of Hector. For 9 days the people of Troy mourned. No trumpet sounded, no sword clashed, no joy was heard. Only the wailing of mothers, the silence of warriors, and the whispers of memory that clung to every stone of the city.
Inside the palace, Andromache prepared Hector's armor for burial.
"You guarded these walls with your body," she whispered, "and now we guard only your memory." Hecuba, his mother, wept by the fire. Priam, once the proud lion of Troy, now walked with bent shoulders and empty hands. On the 10th day, as the sun rose, the city gathered. A bier was fashioned, adorned with flowers, golden veils, and Hector's broken weapons. His body wrapped in fine linen rested atop it like a sleeping god. Priam led the procession, dressed in white robes of mourning. Behind him came Andromache, Hecuba, and Helen, each dressed in black, each with eyes hollow from grief. Then came the people, nobles and slaves alike, for Hector belonged to all of Troy. From the palace to the gates and beyond to the funeral field, the earth trembled beneath their feet. No arrows, no chance of war, only the low, sacred thrum of drums. The pyre was built with cedar and cypress, tall as the city walls. Priam raised his hand. "May the gods of sky and earth welcome my son." They placed Hector's body upon the pyre. Andromache kissed his forehead. Hecuba anointed his chest with oil. Helen draped his sword upon his breast. Then the fire was lit. It rose slowly, crackling with light, as smoke spiraled into the heavens like a prayer to Olympus. "You were Troy's shield," said Priam. "Now may you rest beyond its walls." Burial and legacy. At dawn, the ashes were gathered into a golden urn, cooled with sacred water from the river Scamander. The urn was placed in a marble tomb, surrounded by flowers and stone guardians. A great mound was raised, so even from the sea, sailors would see and say, "Here lies Hector, breaker of horses, prince of Troy." And for a day and a night, the people feasted, sang his praises, and swore vengeance. Yet in that brief pause, the war faded, and in the silence after the fire, Troy remembered what it fought for. Not glory, not conquest, but the love of a father, the courage of a husband, the soul of a city. And so, with Hector buried, the war would carry on, but never again would Troy be the same. The heart of the city had burned, and in its place, only memory remained. Chapter 16. The Wooden Horse, Deception and Doom. After 10 long years, the Greeks vanished. Their ships were gone from the shore. The tents, the fires, the clang of war, all silent. Only a single thing remained on the battlefield. A massive wooden horse, towering, hollow, impossibly crafted. The Trojans stood atop their walls and stared. Some rejoiced. They have surrendered. The gods have driven them home. Others, wiser, frowned. "Why leave such a thing?" muttered Laocoon, priest of Poseidon. "Beware Greeks bearing gifts." But the people were weary, and hope is a dangerous thing. From the hills near Troy, Odysseus and his warriors watched. Hidden inside the belly of the horse were 30 elite soldiers, including Odysseus himself. He had crafted the plan. Leave a token of surrender. Let their pride do the rest. One man was left behind, Sinon, a master of lies. When the Trojans found him, he sobbed, pleaded, and told a tale. "The Greeks left me behind as punishment. The horse is sacred to Athena. If you destroy it, she will curse you. But if you bring it inside your walls, Troy will never fall." It was alive, but it was perfect. Still, not all were fooled. Laocoon stepped forward. He raised his spear, ready to strike the wooden beast. "This is treachery," he cried. "Destroy it now!" But at that moment, from the sea came two serpents, massive and divine. They coiled around Laocoon and his sons, crushing, devouring, silencing. The Trojans gasped. "It is a sign. Athena protects the horse." In terror, they dragged the horse into the city. They tore down part of the wall to do it. And that night, Troy feasted, for they believed the war was over. But for now, it was the silence before the storm.
Chapter 17. The Fall of Troy. Fire and Tears. Midnight Flames. It began with a whisper, a creak of wood, the soft padding of leather boots on stone. The first torch lit beneath the stars. Odysseus and his warriors fanned out across the city. Sinon opened the gates to the waiting Greek army. Menelaus, Agamemnon, Ajax, Diomedes, Neoptolemus, all returned with fire and iron. And as Troy slept in false peace, doom unfurled its wings. The temples, sacred and silent, were the first to fall. Then the palaces, the towers, the gardens. Screams rose with the smoke. End of Troy. Troy burned. Fire and tears. The final resistance. King Priam, old and unarmed, took refuge in the temple of Zeus with Queen Hecuba and his daughters. But even the gods would not protect him now. Neoptolemus, son of Achilles, stormed the altar. "You shed Greek blood for 10 years. Now pay it back in your own." He slew Priam with his father's blade at the foot of the altar. The king's blood soaked the sacred stones. Elsewhere, Andromache clutched her child, Astyanax, begging for mercy. But there was none. The Greeks feared the child might one day seek vengeance. "He must not live," said Odysseus. And so the boy was torn from her arms and thrown from the walls. Helen and Menelaus. Inside the palace, Helen waited. She had caused this war, or had merely been caught in it. Menelaus found her, sword in hand. 10 years, thousands dead, because of you. But when she stepped into the torchlight, her beauty remained undimmed. Her tears were real, her voice soft. "Do you truly believe I asked for any of this?" Menelaus lowered his blade. "Come home," he said. "There is nothing left to return to," she whispered, and yet she followed him. End of Troy. Ashes, and a name that will never die. The city collapses. By dawn, Troy was no more. Its walls shattered, its towers crumbled, its people slain or enslaved. Only ashes remained, and a name that will never die. The gods watched in silence. Athena, once a guardian, turned her face away. Apollo, who once had danced in Troy's temples, vanished with the smoke. And on the hills beyond the city, Aeneas, carrying his father and son, looked back one last time. From these ruins a new city shall rise. But that is another story.
Chapter 18. The Cursed Returns. Homeward Journeys. The gods turned against them. The Greeks thought victory would be sweet. But as they boarded their ships to sail home, Ominous winds rose and the sea turned black, for they had angered the gods. Athena, once their ally, now raged over the sacrilege in her temples. Poseidon, whose priest Laocoon had been slain, churned the waters. Apollo, silent but watching, sent storms upon them. What should have been swift returns turned into wandering, suffering, and death. Their glory had come at a cost. Agamemnon's doom. Agamemnon, the High King, returned to Mycenae with pride, and with Cassandra, the cursed Trojan prophetess, as his captive. But at home, her wife Clytemnestra had not forgotten. "You sacrificed our daughter, Iphigenia," she had whispered for 10 years. "Now I sacrifice you." She welcomed him with feasts, then murdered him in his bath alongside Cassandra. "Justice," she said, blood soaking her robes. The house of Atreus was cursed, and the curse was not yet done. Menelaus and Helen. Menelaus and Helen sailed together. The sea tossed them for 8 years. They wandered from Egypt to distant shores, aging, weary. But eventually they returned to Sparta. There they ruled in peace, but with a silence between them, heavy and strange. "Did you love him?" he once asked. Helen said nothing. "Do you love me now?" he asked again. Still nothing. Some say she was mortal. Others say she was a phantom. No one ever truly knew. And then there was Odysseus, the most cunning of them all. He would suffer the longest, 10 years of wandering, trapped by Calypso, tempted by Circe, challenged by Polyphemus the Cyclops. He would sail past Sirens, face Scylla and Charybdis, and journey into the underworld, all for a single goal: to return to Penelope, his faithful queen. But that tale is told in another epic, the Odyssey. Echoes and ashes. Some never returned. Some chose exile. Others were lost to the sea. Only the poets remembered them. Only the stars heard their names whispered in song. From Troy's ruin came not peace, but more blood, more myths, and the seeds of new empires. The Trojan War had ended, but its shadow would stretch across centuries. Chapter 19. Aeneas, the last Trojan. Escape through fire. When Troy fell, all seemed lost, but Aeneas, son of Anchises and Aphrodite, was spared by fate. As the Greeks rampaged through the city, he carried his aged father on his back, held his young son Ascanius by the hand, and led a small band of survivors into the shadows. Behind them, the city burned. Ahead of them, destiny. "We are not the end," he told his people. "We are the beginning." The long journey. For years they sailed, searching for a new home. Carthage, Crete, Delos, and Sicily, each offered hope, then heartbreak. Aeneas lost his father along the way, burying him with tears on a lonely shore. In Carthage he found love in Queen Dido, who begged him to stay. But the gods whispered, "Your destiny lies elsewhere." He left under darkness. Dido, betrayed, built her own pyre. "Remember this, Aeneas," she cried, flames consuming her. "From my ashes, hatred will rise." And so, the seeds of future war were sown. The underworld.
Guided by the Sibyl, Aeneas descended into the underworld. There he saw the spirits of fallen Trojans, Dido, who turned from him in silence, and the ghost of his father Anchises, who showed him a vision. You shall found a kingdom. Your bloodline will give rise to Rome, rulers of the world. It was not glory Aeneas saw in that vision, but burden. Italy and war again. At last they reached Latium in Italy, but peace was not fated. The local king offered Aeneas his daughter's hand, but another suitor, Turnus, rose in wrath. Once again, war erupted. Trojans and Italians clashed in forests, rivers, and fields. The gods took sides, and in the end, Aeneas faced Turnus in single combat. Wounded, Turnus begged for mercy. Aeneas hesitated, then saw the belt Turnus had taken from a slain friend, and he drove his blade home. And so, the legacy began. From that day, Aeneas became not just a survivor, but a founder. His son Ascanius would build Alba Longa. Centuries later, his descendant Romulus would found Rome. Troy had died, but its heart beat anew. The gods had not lied. Chapter 20. Legacy of the Trojan War. The birth of legends. The echoes of Troy. The city had fallen, its towers reduced to ash. But Troy did not die. It lived on, in song, in sorrow, and in the blood of empires. Through Aeneas, Troy became Rome. Through Helen, the spark of beauty and war became legend. Through Odysseus, the journey itself became myth. The gods had played their game. Now, mankind would carry the burden and the glory. The threads across time. Centuries passed. Rome, rising from the legacy of Aeneas, would become an empire as vast as the world had ever seen. Poets like Homer and Virgil would shape the war into verse, immortalizing heroes and tragedies. The names of Achilles, Hector, Helen, and Paris would echo from stone temples to medieval castles to modern mines. Sing, Muse, Homer once began, and so she did across generations. Troy became an idea, a symbol of love, of loss, of fate. The mortal and the divine. What did it all mean? Was it the wrath of gods? The folly of men? The price of pride? Or simply the weight of destiny? The Trojan War was not just a battle. It was a mirror held up to the human soul. It showed us the heights of honor, the depths of rage, the tears of mothers, the courage of warriors, and the pain of those left behind. In Troy's fire, the myths of the West were forged, and in its ashes, 1,000 stories found their beginning. And still we remember. Even today, we speak their names. Even now, we search for Troy's ruins beneath the soil of time. Because deep down, we know these were more than stories. They were truths told through the lens of myth. And in those truths, we see ourselves.